Howdy, and welcome back to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio.
We're just driving along. We found this one on the side of an embankment going up the hill. And this is right next to where we've been coming, checking this one cow path all summer long. And virtually every time we come up here, in addition to cow and elk and deer tracks, we're finding some Bigfoot tracks on it too. So let's take a quick look. Before we drive away, we checked it a couple days ago. Could have been something else up here. But as you can see, that just keeps going right up the mountain. There's another one that goes over that way. And then there's a big clear cut up there where they did a bunch of foresting. Okay. We're heading back to camp, make some lunch. So Chris has been a long hike out in the woods, and it's getting late in the day, and he's trying to get back again. He does have a gun with him, but not a really high-powered one. He's got a hunting rifle. And as he's coming back, he sees a grizzly bear, a good-sized one. And it's posturing like it's interested in him, and it starts following him. Well, now he's concerned because he's still quite a few miles out there. There's no other hikers out there, and he doesn't have a gun that's big enough to deal with this thing. So he's trying to act tough, you know, stop, make noise and stuff, look bigger. Grizzly backs off a little bit. He takes off again, looks back, Grizzly's still following him. This goes on for quite a long time. And then finally he's getting close to where people are, and he loses track of where the grizzly is. He turns around, it's not anywhere behind him. And he realizes where he's got to go now is down this draw with fairly steep sides, and as you go downhill it gets fairly steep going down this trail, and the sides close in and they get steeper, and it's all wooded on both sides, thickly as a matter of fact. So if the bear wants to get ahead of him and ambush him, it's got enough time to get around and get down in front of him somewhere, and when he gets down in this narrow spot it could just pop right out of the woods and get him. So he's afraid that's what it's thinking about doing. So he's really got his gun ready. He's on edge. He's looking behind. He still doesn't see anything. He starts going down this draw. Well, he gets down almost near the bottom of it, and all of a sudden he hears this roar coming from the edge of the hillside off to his left above him that's so loud, he said, it vibrated his chest. Like he swears the pebbles on the ground were probably vibrating. This roar was so loud. and it stopped him dead in his tracks. And as soon as the roar had almost ceased, it was still going on, he realized there was noise behind him, and he whirled around, and there was the grizzly about 30 feet behind him, and he was looking at its butt as it was running away as fast as it could from whatever it was up there that just made that sound. And he never got to see what it was, but whatever it was, that grizzly bear was sneaking up right behind him, and if it hadn't roared like that at that exact moment, that would have been the end of him. The grizzly would have got him because it was easily close enough. And like I said, he said when he whirled around, that grizzly bear's butt was about 30 feet away from him, and it was going the opposite direction as fast as it could go. So whatever made that roar wasn't another grizzly, and it scared the hell out of that grizzly that was trailing him, aggressive grizzly that was trailing him. So with that, I want to get to another story, and for this I'll need to change hats, because this one is from down in the south, in the area of the legendary folk monster, Boggy Creek. And this story was sent in by a friend of mine who took the time to write it down and then send it to me. And by write it down and send it to me, I mean put it in a book and give me a copy of the book. So I'm going to read you a little short excerpt from Searching for the Unfindable, My Quest for the Arkansas Bigfoot, by our friend of the channel, William Lunsford. And I'm going to hold on a second, I got to get my readers on, because you know how it is trying to read without your readers. I'm sure you've seen other people on other channels have problems with that. Here we go, I'm all set to go now, I've got my readers on. We got it bookmarked with a local leaf here. Just happened to be a copy of it lying on the ground, very conveniently so. Here we go. Now this one talks about aggressive behavior that is not on the side of humans. And he says, this type of militant behavior seems to be happening much more regularly than it used to. With the exception of me being fishing and not hunting, it's almost exactly what happened to me on the day I was expelled from the woods at Days Creek in 1977. I've talked to another 5 men who've had the creature stalk them and run them from their stands, at times claiming some of their equipment for his own trophy. One of them I spoke with said he's seen a Bigfoot following coyotes, possibly to claim their kills as well. I've heard one sound off immediately after a pack of coyotes bansheed through a grove of red oaks, maybe doing the same thing. This thieving type behavior would allow us to classify Sasquatch as either extremely lazy or extremely smart. I vote for the latter. As I said, these are wild animals, and we rarely get to control the circumstances under which we meet, nor can we choose their moods. What a double-barreled game of Russian roulette. Given the right set of influences or circumstances, any run-in with an animal, even domestic, can potentially be dangerous. This is especially so with a being of such enormous size and strength. Abnormal factors such as parental, territorial, illness, hunger, or threat could quickly elevate a normal passing into a code red. Like a collision between a sports car and a diesel, the diesel rarely loses. I can truthfully say, with the many different kinds of interactions I've experienced over the years, if Bigfoot was going to hurt me, he probably would have by now. However, there was one time I firmly believe he meant to harm me, and only surprise turned what was to be my misfortune into his running away from the area. This was Easter Sunday night of 2014, and it was to be the final night of my son's college spring break. Wanting to spend it together before his 4 a.m. departure for Memphis, my wife finally agreed to a nighttime trip to Sulphur River with Reese and me. An oozing fog enhanced the eeriness of driving 3 miles into the woods with only headlights illuminating our way. It was pre-storm weather, with fast-moving cloud cover blowing across what slight periodic crescent moon there was. This time, there was no dust, as the damp sweat from the humidity covered the stones and the dirt on the gravel road. There was only one way in and one way out, with only a 50-yard by 50-yard clearing at the end for a turnaround. 50-yard by 50-yard luxury! Back to the story. We reached the lane's end, positioned the vehicle, and got out of the truck. We dropped the tailgate to prepare our equipment, eventually using it as a seat for the night's expedition. Finally, all pistols were donned, spotlights secured, and a cell phone placed for a recording device. The bullhorn was set at hand, as was a 3-foot piece of cedar we used for a knocking stick. We let the area settle before attempting anything, hoping the noise from our trip in would be enough to attract any of the nearby Bigfoot. It was dark, really black, pitch, abyss, dark. The only light was from the screen on the game Cindy played on her cell phone. After we'd waited what we felt was sufficient, it was time to, as Reese, who's his son, and I sometimes say, let it roll, and it did. That night was to be the first time I tried the new-to-me technique of rock clacking. We were familiar with this area and had twice before in 2013 gotten bell-tone howl responses here, one of which we recorded. This night the animals would not only show his anger, but his stubbornness as well. It took a full 45 minutes to get any type of response at all. At last the signals into the night served their purpose, and he answered my fake barred owl calls. And if you ever heard William's fake barred owl calls, they're really good. They fake barred owls out. There he is, Reese and I said together. Where? I didn't hear anything but that owl, Cindy piped in. Shh, that was not an owl. That was a Bigfoot, Reese whispered. Did you not hear the difference in the octaves of the voice? And she should have, because it was loud. Now that I had his attention, it was time again to try the rocks. I first grabbed a grapefruit-sized boulder and bashed it hard against a nearby hollow tree, hoping that sounded music to its ears. I repeated the step, then pulled a smaller stone from the roadbed. I began to rhythmically pound it against the other like I was trying to make fire. Finally, I heard the distant sound of a muted footstep a short way away, and then I heard another. We got some movement over here on the right. He may be trying to sneak up on us, I said hopefully. Where? I don't hear anything, Cindy blurted, still at regular volume. You gotta be quieter, I chided. Once he knows for sure what we are, he's probably a goner. He stopped right over there about 70 yards away. I can walk to where he is. It was then I got just a whiff of the odorous funk I had come to instantly recognize. Yeah, I got a whiff of that right here at camp last night. Right there 30 feet away. Which one of you two passed gas? I sarcastically asked, just to reassure my hunch. Nobody, they both echoed in unison. Good, I silently thought. It's definitely a Bigfoot. Things would then start to happen. The footsteps began again, this time with more resonance and purpose. The thickness of the nauseous air increased as well. We definitely got one coming in, I told them. He steps a little harder now. I don't hear anything. I think it's your imagination, Cindy said out loud. At the sound of her voice, he paused again on his march toward us. Finally, his footfalls resumed, now stomping, and more frequent and deliberate. For some inane reason, my wife says insane, I decided this would be a great time for an exploratory whoop, whoop. He evidently misunderstood this as either a threat or a love call, because now he was about 50 yards away and on a dead run toward us. I told Cindy, remember I told you we've got one coming in? Well, here he comes. I don't hear... Now I do, she interrupted herself. I can only equate the sound to an elephant driving a bulldozer through the forest, as trees and limbs were being broken everywhere. Cindy jumped from the tailgate and sprang into the truck, locking her door. I pulled my pistol from my holster and replaced my spotlight onto my left hand. I focused the gun sights on the opening where his trail ended into the clearing, and I prepared myself as best I could for what was destined to happen next. I wasn't sure what kind of confrontation was going to take place, only that I was definitely going to be in it. This was not what I had wanted. As he got to the edge of the clearing, I timed my spotlights shining to his expected appearance. For whatever reason, before the light could illuminate his bulky silhouette, he dropped onto all fours and made a direction-changing move like a hairy water bug, only faster. He stood back up after 4 or 5 strides, with Reese and I trying in vain to catch up with him with our spotlights. I wanted Cindy to get a good look at him in the lights, but he was too incredibly fast. He ran to a tree in front of Reese, and we heard a noise like climbing. I now feared he was thinking Reese was the weakest link of the group, so I ran between them and posted up, pistol in hand. Suddenly, the whole forest became graveyard quiet. Hearing the truck would now be no problem, nor was Cindy's pleased to leave. After a few panic-filled minutes, it jumped up and ran away from us, crossing a logging road that headed the other direction from the trail. It was then that I heard the wah, wah, wah bark of a second beast trailing him through the shadows. I'm not so good this is a good idea anymore. We need to go, Cindy demanded. If you hear this truck start up, you better jump into the bed, because I'm leaving. You mean you'd leave your only child for a Bigfoot to get? I joked. I can have more kids, she quipped. You better listen. I don't believe for 1 second this was a bluff charge. nor does my wife. I do believe she meant every word she said about leaving. That was no bluff either. Had I not startled the Bigfoot with the brightness of my spotlight, I might not be typing this book. He says, I was able to take the next day off to follow up this encounter while everything was still fresh. Cindy wanted to go too, but I told her no. I was almost certain that she was the catalyst that had escalated this meeting into one of the scariest nights of our lives. I did not want an encore. My instinct would be to protect her and would have kept me on the lookout for the creature and not as much for evidence. I was able to flip phone photograph 5 different footprints I found that were left along the path he'd taken to our truck, each one making depressions in the ground about 2.5 inches deep. I even found one side-by-side double set of tracks where I told them he'd stopped, nearly 3 feet apart from instep to instep. For comparison, I took one pic beside my .44 pistol, one by a men's old size 11 shoe I found, and one next to a 16-inch piece of tree branch lying near. William, get a tape measure. The steps I was taking around the forest, and directly next to the monster's track, were visibly unnoticeable, and I left no hint I'd been anywhere around that day. So, yeah, and William's considerably heavy, and he's not making any impression on the ground. Twice I heard movement in a nearby thicket giving me the creeps, and making me question whether my imagination was starting to play tricks on me. The third time I heard them, I was sure it wasn't, and I figured I may have been starting to wear out my welcome there. Even if it was a bird, it might have been a big bird, and I've had enough of large animals for one day. Having a definite hunch what I was hearing, I considered the wisdom of continuing this adventure by myself. I was expecting only to look at a place where Bigfoot had been, and not actually still hanging around. Just in case, I alerted my wife by cell of the circumstances, and decided I'd go in. I was determined I wasn't going to let this become one of those times that I'd be fooled. I glanced about 100 yards ahead, plotting the path of least resistance. It was then that I saw something about 7 feet tall, pressing itself against the burned trunk of a medium-sized oak. I stopped dead, debating whether I wanted to try to stalk closer. The next time I looked, its position had changed. It was unsettling to see my adversary was moving around behind its post, apparently spying on me. The dark shape appeared to be slightly crouching and blended into the charred remains almost perfectly. It was now less than 70 yards away, never giving me opportunity for a full view. Whatever the creature was, it seemed intent on keeping the obstacle between us. I slowly maneuvered to hide behind a tree of my own, peeking around several more times to keep tabs on its location. I couldn't see it clearly because some of the scrub between us, but it appeared to be looking my way. Hoping to use the growth to my advantage, I decided I would try sneaking closer from behind a line of large oaks. There were several of these giant shade trees between whatever the animal was and me. I picked up a small leaf-filled branch and placed in front of my face, hoping to camouflage my movement. I squatted to peek towards my destination, even duck-walking at times to keep my profile low. Sneaking forward with the stealth of a burglar, I quietly repositioned myself behind each oak, peering around to make sure the thing was still there. Every time I would see my target, my mind raced with the thoughts of how this might end. After repeating this scenario about 5 times, I navigated the space between the final 2 trees, leaving me only about 35 yards from where it was. In case the need arose like a lawman from the Old West, I eased my pistol from its holster. I readied my cell phone, gathered the courage to garner my next look, and I leaned around, and there behind the tree stood nothing. The creature was there when I checked the last time, but now it was gone, and all that remained was a slight stench from its presence. "Uh-oh," I said aloud as if someone else was there. I hoped he'd left because his interest in me had been satisfied, but I feared the creature was now beginning a stalk of his own. I decided this game of I Spy had gone on long enough, so I stepped out and began to holler, making the most noise I could to diminish the chances of a surprise meeting. Unnerved that hadn't even heard a twig snap as it disappeared, I was gone too. The smell began to worsen, so I quickened my retreat to the truck and headed for the hills. I scanned the wood edges on each side, hoping to spot his hiding place. I never saw it, and hoped he wasn't keeping it from me just so he could use it again. Later that afternoon, I discovered the story of Charles, and he experienced one of the most frightening, bizarre Bigfoot interactions I'd ever come across. This story was told to me by Charles himself. I'm glad that it hadn't happened to me. I'd never met him before, though he had been a friend and employee of my father-in-law for many years. My in-laws had told him about our brush with disaster that night before, and coincidentally, he was still at their home that afternoon when Cindy and I went by. They all joked they were glad to see us, not only there, but anywhere. We responded we were glad to still be seen, and had a few good laughs. It was when Charles responded with the statement, "I know how you feel," that I changed the subject from us to him. Now it occurs that not more than 5 miles from Bright Star towards the outskirts of Doddridge is the southern boundary of the Sulphur River Wildlife Management Area. Sulphur River. This spot between the two backwoods communities was a popular place for him and his family to spend a weekend camping and overall enjoying the outdoors. It was a time looked forward to by the whole clan, complete with tents, campfires, and cooking in the wilderness. It was a utopia for growing boys, and perfect for things like hide and seek, chase, rock throwing, and fishing. When a twist to the unnatural stepped in, this trip ended up being the time for something else. As the family was preparing for supper, Charles' dad sent him down to the creek back to bring back some water for camp. Happy he'd been asked to help, he ran to the water's edge and thrust his pail into the stream. As he stretched out his frame to make the most of his efforts, he heard a rock tumble a few feet away. Now, brothers being what they are, it wasn't beyond his to sneak up and try and give him a good scare. And not wanting to give them the satisfaction of a successful prank, he never let his gaze drift from the water. And after a long couple of seconds, he noticed the shadow now being cast over him did not match their wiry frames. He had scarcely looked up, only to stare face to face into the eyes of something he'd seen before only in nightmares. A mere 6 feet away stood a menacing 7-foot beast, covered with shaggy dark hair and looking at Charles as though sizing him up for supper. He scrambled to his feet and took off back to camp, leaving the bucket for the creature's pleasure. His arrival was met with a reprimand from his dad, questioning where's the water he was sent to retrieve. As he told his father the chilling story of the visitor he'd seen on the bank, suddenly Dad's demeanor changed and he hollered, "Get your brothers and get in the truck." He turned just in time to see the fearful animal's head cresting over the hill, with him heading in a straight line toward their campsite. The family gathered without hesitation into the pickup bed, and his father floored it to a safer distance at the top of the hill. They watched in disbelief as the mammoth brute tore through their belongings, confiscating what he wanted, mainly the food, and destroying the rest. To punctuate his performance, he stood and positioned their way, as if to say, "If you don't like it, do something about it." He then took his stolen booty and, to their relief, leapt in the same direction he came. After finally regaining a measure of courage, it wasn't long before they loaded what remained from the devastation and left as well. Adding another accent of the freakish, he stated this animal only had 3 toes on each foot, which is, of course, the distinguishing trait of the legendary folk monster. There's one animal, he says, that I've repeatedly heard about for about the last 4 years, whose reputation would make him the poster child for bad attitude. It lives only 15 miles from the site of Charles' encounter, right on the Arkansas line near Cass, Texas. His haunt is a deer lease that borders near the Sulphur River, within a mile or two from where the river crosses the Texas state line into Arkansas. As stated, most people believe the oft-promoted profile of a passive creature interested only in doing his own thing and leaving everyone else alone. Comforting, yes, but there is truth to the proverb, there's an exception to every rule, and that being the case, this guy is it. To date, he has run at least 6 people off this land who have sworn never to return. One pair of hunters is a grandfather and his young grandson, who got much more than they paid for when Granddad joined the group. Due to the ferocious behaviors it projected toward the pair, it took only 2 trips for the grandfather to renounce his membership, telling them that they could keep their money, as their lives were more important than staying there. The whole time they were on stand, it circled the pair while they hunted, continuously growling a low, gurgling growl, and screaming and breaking limbs while following them back to the vehicle. Another hunter he had harassed refused to leave, but has abandoned a high-dollar stand feeder and camera in one corner of the woods where they're still set up. He jokes he has come to a truce with the ill-tempered giant, and it can keep all his equipment if it'll just stay in that area and leave him alone where he has placed his newsstand. I'm not too sure how well Bigfoot keeps treaties like that. As I'm writing this book, a Texas deer season is just beginning, and he says, I'm curious what this year has in store for the members of the hunting club. As they say on the news, we'll have more details as they develop, and I believe they will. And that's the stories from William Lunsford, from down there in Falk, Arkansas land. Got the hat on from the amazing Keith Crabtree, Keith Crabtree, of course, portrayed the monster, the Falk monster, in the Legend of Boggy Creek. I was sipping my tea. Good tea. Yeah, from the Arizona Iced Tea Company. It's one of the teas I like to drink when I'm out in the woods. Let's have a look around here and give you guys a quick view of what's behind me over here. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. Give you kind of a mountaintop view over here. So that's what I got behind me. About a mile of drop off. We were up here all night last night, and there's my tent right there. And last night we had a little incident. I'm going to let Johnny film and talk about it. But at the end of the whole thing, we went to bed after the cattle stampede through camp. Not kidding. We got video to show you all the cattle. I came up here and got in the tent, and I got a waft of obvious Sasquatch stank from up here. And according to Johnny, and we both heard this right before all the thug cows that were coming after us.
Yep. Zooming right on them.
Look at all that eye shine. Now we're getting attacked by a herd of renegade alpine nocturnal cows. Oh, crap, there's a whole pile of them down here.
Right.
Well, come on up and visit, guys. There's plenty of salt lick over here. Move on over. I'm blinded. Right over there, we heard this really loud snap. And then all the cows went, brrr, and they all beat it that way as fast as they could down the hill. And after that, while we were sitting there talking, every so often he could hear something moving around back here. And then, like I said, when I came up and got into the tent, whatever it was must have been back here at that point, because I could really smell them. I had to be fairly close for that. And the other interesting thing is, right before the cows stampeded, Johnny had his camera going and was filming them now that they were like way too close to us. And right at the end of that little piece of video, all of a sudden it started fuzzing out, just like it always does when they get too close. You get that electromagnetic interference. So that might have been when he got close enough. Nocturnal alpine cows are sneaking up closer. Hey guys, are you coming to party with us tonight? Good to see you. 918 looking good. Double Lot 1. 912, how you doing? They got all these nice cute names. Oh, somewhat everybody gonna hang around, do some cud chewing and some cow patty dropping. Right on. Enjoy the moonlight. We'll have a shindig here with no campfire because there's a burning ban on. Let's all have fun tonight.
Hey, you seen Bigfoot around?
Yeah, you guys seen Bigfoot around? Did Bigfoot just tell you to come up here and visit us? Is that why you're up here? Well, there you go. Everybody in the audience who wants to see what we're doing late at night, we're being invaded by cows. That's what we're doing. And at that point, we had a whole bunch of food lying on the ground, and we thought the cows were either going to trample it or eat it. So I was holding the flashlight for Johnny to grab all of the food and hide it in the trunk of the vehicle so the cows wouldn't trample it or eat it. And it was all sitting here by this pine tree. He's running back and forth to the car, and I'm sitting over there where the cooler is. And that's when he heard crack from back there. And all the cows that were over here beat it that way as fast as they could go. So there you go. That's our encounter from last night. There was up here. One up here decided to chase the cows away so they wouldn't eat all the food. Probably thinking we will give him some if they didn't eat all of it. He's right. Johnny helping take everything apart. We got most of the stuff in camp packed up. We're getting ready to roll out because, hey, thunderstorms. We've already been hearing the thunder, so we get everything taken down, packed up pretty much, so we're ready to roll if it starts raining on us here. But we're pretty much done, heading back to town. So, hope you enjoyed coming along with us for our fun little mini Bigfoot expedition to the ghost town of Coloma. Zooming in, there's an asterisk structure back there. Just spotted it going by. And it looks like down below it and further back there's an X structure too. Currently raining, so we're not going to get out and go take a look at it. We're almost past that tree so I can see it again. Stop. Back in there, it looks like there's an X or something too. It's too far back to see. Oh. Alright, there you go.
Kind to everyone. Safety first, last, and always. Pay it forward. Don't be mean to people if you don't have to be. Don't flip off the mountain giant. Don't poke Dogman with a stick. Don't punt the puck, would you? And for God's sake, whatever you do, do not hug the Wookiee.